right, what's up, guys? I actually want to start by congratulating the Valkyries on the win last night and their start of the season. It's been fun to watch. Ohema, Natalie have done a great job, players. So I think they're kind of like our sibling in this organization. It's fun to support them, and it's been fun going out, check out games, and really excited for the Bay Area. And anyway, we turn to the draft, our stuff right now. We're getting ready for that. And 41. I will say on that pick, there has been a multi-time MVP pick there, so anything can happen. But we're going through the stuff right now, looking at things, and come Thursday night, we'll be ready to select if that's where we're at. We'll obviously look at other options, trades, trade up, trade back, trade out. Anything's possible, but feel pretty good with where we're at, getting to know the draft pretty well, and hopefully we can grab ourselves another good player and move forward and grow them, develop them, and add them to the program. But open up to questions for anybody that has them, and happy to discuss anything.
At 41 or otherwise, if you trade up or down, how valuable would it be to add a player in the draft that can impact the team right away, given where you're at as a roster?
Well, that'd be great, but I always say, it's really hard to do. We've been fortunate the last couple of years between QP and Trace, guys that have been able to come in and play right away a little bit. It's been great. I just never bank on that. I just think it's hard. You'd be lucky to draft a guy in the second round that can make it at all. So I think we have to be realistic about what it is. But sure, we're going to analyze this thing, look at it, and try and find the best player we can find that'll be able to contribute to this franchise, and that's the goal.
How much does seeing what Oklahoma City and Indiana did in the finals, how young they were, fast-paced, does that impact at all how you're going to build the team going forward this summer?
Well, I think you got to run your own race. And in our case, we've got 3 players in their 30s that are really good, and that's the hand we're playing. And it's certainly admirable to what the Pacers and the Thunder and some of these other teams have done in the league. But we've got our group. We're committed to that, and we got to build with it and around it, and that's kind of what we'll do. And then as time goes on, maybe that changes, but multiple different ways to build a team, and I think the way we're going about doing ours is what's right for us.
Mike, you've heard I've had a few scouts over the recent years say that 21-year-old draft pick is old. And I'm wondering, you guys have kind of gone the other way a little bit lately with guys like Trace and QP. What's your feeling on this draft in terms of the 18, 19-year-old guys versus the guys who've been around in college for a while, and how they might fit with your team?
Yeah, it's really interesting this year with the draft. Going through all the different players and looking at their pages, the amount of guys that are 22, 23, 24 is startling. Obviously, we have not been afraid to take older players, but I think with the NIL stuff, you're seeing more and more. You have more underclassmen have gone back to school, so there's less younger players, particularly in our range where we're picking. So it's fascinating. And I think it's a little bit different feel. We're trying to grasp how that models out with these older guys. Now, we've had some success with them, but there's just so many of them this year. But it does lend itself to the older guys generally can play sooner than later. And if that's the way it goes, maybe that happens. But again, not going to bank on it. These guys are all coming in, starting from zero with no NBA experience, so you just never know how they adjust.
Mike, obviously, Tyrese Halliburton's injury was devastating last night, but you had to commend the Pacers for how much they kept fighting, just throughout the playoffs also. When it comes to roster building, how do you know that character-wise you have those guys who are never going to give up, who are going to compete no matter what? Because I think that's what everyone's kind of taken from that Pacers group.
Yeah, I think you can take it from our group too. We've got a group that battles. It's a huge priority for us anytime we sign, draft, or trade for a player. Knowing that player, who they are, how competitive they are, those things really matter. They're super important, as displayed, here in the playoffs, the finals, whether it's Indiana, Oklahoma City, the relentlessness, the persistence of those players. And I feel like we've got a lot of those guys on our roster. So we're in good shape there. We want to continue to add more of them.
Is there any trait you're prioritizing in the draft more than others, I guess?
As far as trade, we'll look at stuff. I think most likely when you're in the second round, it's probably looking at moving up or back within that round. Is there a possibility we could move into the first round? Sure, I wouldn't put it at highly likely, but you never know. On draft night, you get calls and you explore things, you look at stuff, and we'll continue to do that.
And then
Trait.
roster trait.
Okay.
All good. That works too, though.
Generality. That's my comment on the trade. As far as trait, I think we look for multiple traits, both intangibles in terms of character and approach and all that, and then there's some, I think, skill traits we're looking for. And I think that's pretty consistent with the things that I've identified between shooting, defense, passing, those types of things that generally fit well within our system of how Coach Kerr wants to play, and the players we have on our team with Steph, Draymond, Jimmy, those guys. Those kind of traits are something that we look for. I think you also have to be mindful just in general when you're picking in the second round, the later you go, you're almost just trying to pick somebody that's going to make it. So you have to be a little careful about being too particular. But in general, those are the traits we like.
And then just to follow, do you go best player available, or if there's an upside pick maybe at 41 that you might not expect to be there, how do you weigh those two things?
Yeah, I think generally the later you go, it's just the higher probability of the guy making it. That's what we lean towards, and usually those guys have a nice rounded skill set. They have maybe a glaring deficiency with size or athleticism or one blatant thing they're missing, but they do a lot of other things really well, and maybe that's how you can kind of beat the system a little bit and get a guy in here that can survive.
Speaking of trades, I know once the draft is over, or obviously we've seen action before. We've seen some action happening the last few days. Has you getting a measure of what the trade market is? Or do you feel like there's going to be a lot of action around the league and that you can maybe jump into, or are you kind of approaching it as we're going to be aggressive in this trade market?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways we can go. We've got some free agents that are priorities. We got to handle that, but some of that stuff may lean into trades and other things. Obviously we got wound up into a big deal last summer, multi-team trade, and so anytime you get into free agent stuff and you start looking at exceptions and cap space and all these things, it lends itself to it. We'll be opportunistic. I think with our cap and strategy group, those guys are really good. So we'll look at everything, and it's hard to say right now, though, honestly, as far as like what's out there, what could happen. But we'll definitely be in the mix. I think we've shown a history of doing that.
And Mike, you guys have gone from participant to observer in the last 4 or 5 weeks of the playoffs. As you've watched these games play out, what have you taken about just watching the way the teams operate, the way the rosters are built, that might influence you going forward, or if anything?
Yeah, I think it just is bearing out that, defense is still really important. And then the offensive end, to be able to have space on the floor to combat these defenses. Certainly Indiana had that with some of the floor spacing bigs they had. And then I think, obviously you go back to further rounds with the Knicks, Minnesota, you got to, but honestly, to go deep in the playoffs, you kind of got to have a little bit of everything. You got to play offense, you got to play defense, you got to have size, you got to be able to defend on the perimeter. You got to put together a really good team, and that's what Oklahoma City's done. Sam did a great job, and credit to Indiana as well. Those guys, heck of a year. Kevin Pritchard did an amazing job. Rick Carlisle, what a coach. So just need really good players.
How much, in addition to follow-up, quality depth? You saw that especially in the finals here with guys coming off the bench and putting in production. How much is that a factor versus just trying to ride like the Knicks did, ride your main 4, 5, 6 guys?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways to do it. Last year going into the season, we really leaned into depth, and it was good for us in some ways. I think in some ways it could create some issues with lineups and playing time, and puts a lot of stress on Steve and the coaching staff in terms of who to play. I do think there's a level of depth that you have to have. If you can have 7, 8, 9 guys that are NBA rotation players, you're going to be in business. Obviously, that helps prevent issues with injuries where a guy or two goes down. But just to make it through, it's a long haul. 2 months of postseason basketball where it's at your highest limit. You got to have that depth, and that's something that will. It matters to us. I feel really good about our roster. If you look at guys 10 to 14, 10 to 15, and that's part of having depth. I think we can get better in the middle. I think we can get better and add some depth there, and then we're really talking.
Seems like, Desmond Bain gets traded for 4 first-round picks. Seems like every offseason someone's getting traded for 3, 4, 5 first-round picks. In your mind, has the draft been devalued, or draft picks been devalued in recent years? And kind of where do you see the draft when it comes to building a team in terms of importance?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little bit eye of the beholder with the draft picks. Certain teams value picks differently. They value draft pick swaps differently. And I think for your own team, when you're sending them out, it's important to evaluate where you're at. If you're a younger team, that has a longer runway, then you're probably going to be more inclined to send draft picks out. If you're an older team that has a shorter runway, you got to be a little bit more protective of those picks. And no doubt you should use them when the time comes. If you're really trying to win, but you got to be selective about it. You got to think it through of the value of your own picks, because once you lose them, the path to not being good and sort of doing a little rebuild or anything like that goes out the window because you don't control your picks.
Where are you at with Kuminga and his restricted free agency, and how do you hope that situation plays out?
Yeah, so we can start with the finals ending last night. We can start, pursuing that right now, leading up into free agency, and I think we're in a good spot with it. Honestly, we have the ability to bring him back. He's restricted, and I think there'll be good dialogue. And I'd like to figure something out sooner than later. That'd be great. But I also acknowledge with restricted free agency, these things can drag out a little bit and take some time. But I think we feel pretty comfortable with who J.K. is as a player, and what he can do for our organization, and we'll continue. It's a main priority going into free agency.
What would be the benefits of getting something done sooner than later? Like, why do you want that to happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think just clarity, right? Roster clarity in terms of what else we need to add in free agency. Also, what we have to spend in terms of minimums, exceptions, those different types of things. So I think that's the sooner the better for everyone. His sake too, I would say. I would believe, but like I said, restricted free agency can be a little different, so we may have to be patient.
How much do you have to even declare like what his role is going to be in your minds, or even in discussions with him, before you can get to a number, before you can decide whether it's better for him to move? Like, do you have to fix in your mind? I know things can change, but obviously with Steve and everyone else, what his role is going to be, and what do you imagine it is right now?
Yeah, I think it's important to have those discussions. I mean, anytime, whether it's your own guy you're bringing back or signing a new player, you always talk with, I talk with the player. Steve does. Sometimes he connects with, our players on our roster too. I mean, you have all these conversations. In JK's position, being an incumbent player, it's a little bit more known. But yeah, I think some of those conversations will need to happen, especially the way the season kind of unfolded last year, where there's some moments where he wasn't playing as much, and then the role's bigger, and it's kind of, then he was in, like all this up and down. Sure, that's something that will probably be necessary to clarify.
Hi, Mike. How does free agency look different now when you have just the sheer number of trades? Do you see it any differently? I mean, I know it's draft week, but that's right on the horizon too, and maybe that affects the draft too.
Yeah, a couple things. I mean, I think first off, teams are less reliant on cap space and saving up for big free agents. You just see a lot more extensions of players already on the roster, so there's probably less players out there. I think the other caveat to it is there's a few mechanisms that will hard cap you to these different aprons that we have to be aware of, and that can restrict some moves and some trades and things like that. And when those trades do happen, it creates those hard caps at times. So being leery of those things, because for us, a team that's willing to spend a lot of money, you have to be careful about limiting yourself. We did that a little bit last summer with the first apron. Fortunately, we were able to move some things around and acquire a player like Jimmy Butler halfway through the season, but it can make it hard. And so to be mindful of that stuff, I think, is important.
Does more scouting come into play when you're looking at potential trade options and things? Or maybe that sounds silly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on it regardless, whether it's guys that are going to be free agents, guys that potentially could be eligible for trade, or players that we want to trade for. We've got a pro scouting staff that's out there all year long looking at players, so I don't think much has changed in that regard. Maybe just some different mechanisms to make it happen.
Mike, obviously, Oklahoma City winning the championship, still a very young team. Is it as simple as saying, okay, to get out of the West, you got to find a way to get past those guys? And if so, how do you compete with their youth, their size, their athleticism, and all of that?
Yeah, well, they'll be the defending champs next year going into the season. They'll be the team that we got to knock off for sure. And the good news is, though, I mean, there's been an incredible amount of parity the last 6-7 years. Multiple different champions, multiple different finalists. So I don't want to say it's wide open, but I don't think it's to the point where it was in 2016, 17 with this organization, where it's really, really hard to oust a team. So Oklahoma City is really good. They're gonna they play their cards right. They're gonna be really good for a long time, and health is a part of that and certain other things. But no doubt, the regular season they had this year was incredible, and obviously making the playoff run to win the championship this year, they're gonna be the team to beat.
Like, obviously anything can happen, and you're going to be open to everything, as you always are. But last summer, we know kind of the big names that you guys were discussing and came close to, or however that went. Does adding Jimmy Butler, and maybe one of the names that was coming up last summer, kind of put a little bit of a ceiling on kind of the kinds of names you're talking about? I know, again, you never know, but that $50 million player, whatever, is that kind of not going to be in sight this time?
Only because just of our salary structure and the way it works with the amount of money you can use underneath the second apron. That probably restricts it more than anything for us in terms of pursuing the best roster we can. So I think we'll look at stuff. We'll look at players that we really like that may, we just got to be, it's just almost impossible for us to add players in the salary range of guys we were looking at last summer since we've added Jimmy. So that would be the only limiter. But in terms of like finding talent, improving this team, we're going to look under, every rock to try and do that.
This is more out of curiosity than anything, but when you have like the 41st pick in a draft and you're working on draft prep, how high up does like your board go? Like, do you do the top 10?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do the whole thing, just from a process standpoint, to be able to look back to see how we're evaluating players. And since I've been here, we've drafted almost at every level. We've drafted 2, we drafted 7, we've drafted 19, we've drafted multiple picks in the second round, last pick of the first round, that type of stuff. So you got to be ready for anything, and I think it's just a good exercise to go through for us to have a whole complete board. You never know. Draft night, something happens, you trade up. So we got to be ready for everything, and it's a fun week and exercise to go through all that and lock it in, and then you can look back and see how you did.
Mike, obviously everybody's looking for a 16-win player, playoffs, right? But I remember Draymond on exit interviews was bringing up 82-game players, and obviously we know Steph, Jimmy, Draymond's ages and everything. What is it going to take to get those 82-win players so you guys aren't in playoff mode in February already, right? I mean, how do you create that kind of roster so you have a little more comfort in March, April?
Yeah, I mean, hopefully we can get some 96-win players. Hopefully, I think I did the math right there. But, I think it's a great point. This isn't a team that we can just say, hey, let's get through the regular season and have a roster ready to go for the postseason. The West is really tough. The league is really tough. I mentioned the parity before. So in that regard, we won 48 games this year and we were in the play-in. So we've got to be able to have a really good team that can sustain the regular season through some nights of rest, through some injuries, all that may come about. We've got to we're taking all that into account. Guys that can, we look at, trades and free agency. We're going to look at guys, how healthy they are, right? How many games they play. That stuff is important, and we'll factor it all in, and hopefully we can also put together a roster that we feel once the regular season turns over to the postseason, that team can be really good too.
Obviously, a lot of questions about Jonathan, but just wanted to check in with 2 younger guys, Brandon and Moses. I know they went through surgeries this offseason. Just your overall expectations for them getting ready for training camp, et cetera.
Yeah, on the health front there, for sure. Those guys had successful procedures and, nothing major, which is good, and they'll be able to get back and definitely be ready by training camp and even have a good portion of their summer for a player development program and all that. So they're doing well, and hopefully those are things, get knocked out, put it behind you, and move on.
Mike, whether it's free agency or the draft, where do you prioritize point of attack defense versus rim protection defense?
Great question. I feel like that's a big debate throughout the league right now, and generally the rim protection's more valuable. At least that's the way guys are paid and guys are sought after in trades. But You ask any coach, point of attack is pretty important. Being able to control the ball, handle it in these pick and rolls. Some of these guys in this league right now, they can guard on the ball. Big guards have been highly effective with teams that have gone deep in the playoffs. So both are really important. With having a guy on our team like Draymond, we're elite with a guy like that, and I think we can be better on the ball. So I don't want to say that means it's more important on the ball for us. I would say both are extremely important, and we'll look to handle both those in free agency. But to me, you can't have enough. It's like shooting. If you can have a bunch of guys out there that can guard, that can switch, and then most importantly protect the backside, you're in business. And Raymond, I gotta talk to these guys on Thursday night too.
See you soon. Yeah. After we get you over.
That's right.